AT&T ThreatTraq for December the 6th, 2012. This program provides network security, highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today on our program, we have Dave Gross and John Markley joining me, Nancy Grover. So let's go ahead and get right into the show. So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about was a new initiative by DARPA and the Department of Defense. And it was basically, a lot of the headlines are putting it I think, in a pretty good way, basically saying DARPA is waging war on backdoors. So some of the articles that I've been reading about this think that this war DARPA is waging against backdoors is a result of a report from October of this year from the Congress. It was a very scathing report, basically saying that businesses really needed to be very careful when doing business with the Chinese, especially Chinese telecommunication firms. And the reason why is that in investigating the software and really looking at all the code, they're finding that there's a lot of backdoors in the code. Now, those that do a lot of programming, of course, are very familiar with the backdoors because it kind of gives us, I used to program, gives programmers easy way into the application to make some fixes. System administrators sometimes set up backdoors too so that if a system goes down, they can get into the application and make some fixes that way. But there are a lot of vendors that put in backdoors also unbeknownst to the people who are buying the software from them. And so that is enabling the vendor to potentially go into the application, hopefully just to make, some updates and some changes or to help to correct a problem. But there are cases where these backdoors are there. They get discovered by bad people that aren't intent on going in to fix things and instead are going in to spy, to collect data, to alter the software and that sort of thing. So again, DARPA has set up this program, and what they are looking to do is get a group of people together, people who are interested in contributing, to find a solution to this backdoor problem. They're trying to they're trying to find some kind of like best practices that companies can use, things that maybe tools that can look at code and identify backdoors, and that sort of thing. So I know this has been an ongoing problem for years and years and years. This is nothing new. This is not new because some report came out in October. What do you guys have run into this, I'm sure, in your time in security? And
I know I've seen a few legitimate backdoors, but most of them are not ones that we want to be there, so we close them as quickly as possible, obviously. But I know that it's one of probably the biggest concerns that the government has, regarding Chinese and outside manufacturing, especially for SCADA and other critical key infrastructure.
So what would you consider a legitimate backdoor then?
Well, I think there's some things that you have to. It's a hard question. You have to think about it in regards to support or some kind of a. If the backdoor was some kind of a key, that is owned by or controlled by the person or the group that actually runs the software or the product, I could see where, and in cases where excessive support is needed, some kind of an out-of-band access mechanism. But there's really, I think, very few times that that's real applicable. I agree.
Yeah. Well, to try to combat the problem, I mentioned that DARPA is soliciting people to help, and so they're going to have a special day called Proposers Day, where they're going to what they call it vetting commodity IT software and firmware. And there's a site out there. We'll have the site online here for you to see where you can go and read more about the project, but. I think it's a really good thing. The Department of Defense is not doing this just for them, though it's certainly going to help them because they use thousands and thousands of pieces of software that they buy from others. But companies like our own, any large company, or even an individual that's using some big software, I'm sure would love to see this happen. So I don't know if you guys have anything more to say about that, but I think it's a pretty good thing, and mostly I'm just kind of talking about it to let you all know that it's being thought of, and it's being considered, and they're trying to make things happen.
So is this effort looking to detect backdoors, or is this more of how to better secure the backdoors that are there legitimately?
It's doing both. It's looking for a way to detect them. It's looking for a way, or maybe some standards that can be used in the vendor community that vendors would need to adhere to. But yes, most definitely a tool to identify these backdoors. And so, Dave, since you just spoke up there, it seems like a good time for you to talk about something that you brought up to our group, or I'm going to bring up to everybody else, and that's hard-coded admin account in some Samsung printers. Yes.
It turns out that they've discovered that there's a hard-coded admin password for the SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol, that's hard-coded in many Samsung printers and also Dell-branded printers that are made by Samsung. So there's both of those types. And basically it allows access to the SNMP protocol, which is typically there to gather network statistics and also do device configuration and stuff like that. So a remote unauthenticated attacker could get in and get into the device with administrative privileges, making changes to the device configuration, collecting data about the devices that are connected to the network, and potentially getting access to information that was sent by the users to the device. It turns out that the way these devices were set up, the users don't have access to be able to change that password. And so that's a problem because, with that password being wired in and not being able to change it, you have a vulnerability sitting there that, anybody that knows the password can get access. What they've said is that a workaround in the meantime is to disable the SNMP on the printers. There was some controversy as to whether that actually fixed the problem or not. The U.S. CERT reported in their advisory that turning it off does not fix the problem, that you're still susceptible, but according to later information from Samsung, it sounds like if you disable SNMP version 1 and 2, or if you use the secure SNMP version 3 until the firmware updates are made, then you're protected. And it sounded like the firmware releases were going to be available very soon anyway, so they may already be available or soon to be available.
Dave, I mean, I don't know, my experience has been that printers, that people a lot of times don't think to update them. Do you think people are going to really pay a lot of attention to that?
Probably a lot of them are not, unless it's in more of a corporate environment where they're managed printers as opposed to just ones that people get and put on their network and forget about.
What kind of configuration changes could you do? I mean, what kind of harm could you do? Let's say I'm at work and I'm going to print a proprietary document. Could, in these configurations that get changed, could somebody ultimately scan the document without my knowledge, or copy it in some way and then have access to it? I mean, can they do something that dramatic?
It wasn't clear that this interface allowed them to do that. It may be more of some of the wired-in values, some of the network configuration values to disable the printer, or change its addresses and stuff like that. I'm not sure if there would be a way for the printer to remotely forward things or stuff like that. It wasn't clear exactly what was available through the SNMP interface.
I wouldn't think it maybe could forward, but maybe store. I don't know how complex these printers are. I know some of the very large ones can do all kinds of exciting things that my printer doesn't do.
Yes.
Oh, should it store it, and then someone could access it over the network, what was stored? I just wasn't sure if that was a capability or not.
It might be a capability, and I'm not sure if it's available through the SNMP interface or not.
All right. Well, that was pretty interesting, and I know printers have been an issue for years and years and years on a network. I remember probably even 12, 13, 14 years ago when people first started talking about the possibilities that printers could be hacked, for lack of a better word, but it looks like it's still an issue. I guess it is an issue just because it's on a network.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave. So now I want to talk about something that's actually been an ongoing issue. First, I think, came to light earlier this year, and then most especially in August of this year, and that is the P2P Zeus botnet, the variant called Gameover. And so it's kind of resurfacing again. And right now, this particular Zeus variant is using another botnet that has a big, spam as a service capabilities. And so they're contracting with them or paying them or in some way using this other botnet called Cutwail to send out a lot of spam viruses pretending to be from major U.S. banks. So earlier this year, again, when that particular variant of Zeus was doing this, they were impersonating like online retailers and cell phone companies and social networking sites and banks as well. And what they were doing were they were, telling somebody, oh, you made this big, huge purchase, and we need you to verify it, and that sort of thing, trying to entice somebody to click on a link or whatever. But this particular one is instead, I'm going to bounce actually on these slides. It is sending out this new email right here, basically telling people that they've got an encrypted message from, and then it has a bank's name, and you can see these are all blocked out. And I got this from Dell SecureWorks, who wrote up a very excellent report on this Gameover, Zeus Gameover, and they wrote it back in August, I believe. It's still a really good read. But anyway, they're basically telling people that, you know what, you made, we need to contact you about something that's going on with your bank account, and we are concerned about your privacy, so we need to encrypt everything so the bad guys can't read what we're writing back and forth. So therefore, you need to click here on this attachment. And then what the attachment does, I'm going to go back a slide. The attachment does is it uses the Pony downloader, and it goes out and then gets the Gameover Zeus variant and loads that into the person's computer. So what's interesting about, again, this one is that I think that it's making itself sound a lot more legitimate by using words like encryption and, things that maybe some people aren't aware of or that people think make it sound very, very legitimate. And so once you click on this attachment, you'll get a loading message. And the loading message appears to simply be a means of distracting somebody for a moment before they realize really what's going on. And then they come to a site that asks them to register in order to receive their encrypted message. Some people will fall for it at that and do that, and some people won't fall for it at that time, but because they've been waiting for this loading message, they are in fact getting some things loaded onto their machine that they don't necessarily want loaded on there. So the reason I'm bringing this up, and I'm sure that it's been talked about, again, over the whole year, is that there is this little difference to it, number one. And number two, I'm thinking, well, it is the holiday season. A lot of people are out there shopping. People are going to see a message from their bank and get concerned because they don't want any of their funds tied up or anything happening to their funds. They want them to be available while they're doing all of this shopping. So, and basically that's all it really is to it. Well, that's not all it is to it, but it's, you know, I think it's pretty interesting the way they've worked this whole thing. Again, this particular Zeus variant uses a peer-to-peer way of communicating rather than having a centralized server. So that makes it a lot easier, or a lot more difficult to track. And also what I found interesting about Gameover is that this is not a botnet that's up for sale or up for rent like a lot of botnets are. The people who run it control it and are not sharing it with others. So therefore, security researchers aren't able to get a hold of the source code and look to see what's really going on. So this is making it very difficult for everybody who's trying to get it stopped. And I think it's just something we're going to see that's going to just keep going and going and going, and they're probably going to get a lot more clever about the way they put their spam out there. So have you guys heard any more about this? Other than what I just explained?
I haven't. I don't know, David, if you have.
No, I know one of the big things about Zeus is that it's a keylogger, and so it's good for picking up credentials. You know, if you're going to your online banking or something like that, it's specifically good at picking up those type of credentials and targeting those kind of things. And they're just finding, you know, new ways to do the social engineering to get you to become infected, and you know, these schemes just keep coming. So you always have to be on the defensive whenever you're reading an email. You have to be thinking, you know, does this thing make sense? You know, am I getting something from a source where I think I should be getting it? You know, how did they know my email address, and is it a legitimate email?
No, I got an email talking about the legitimate emails a couple of days ago for that said it was from FedEx, and that they had tried to deliver a package to my house, and I wasn't there, evidently, even though I was, and they were sending it back, and it looked like it was not what the type of email I might expect from FedEx. In other words, it was pretty just plain text. So it looked quite simple. I didn't see any typos in it. There were plenty of links I could check. And I thought it was odd that they said they delivered this thing, that I wasn't there when I was, and that they wouldn't make an attempt to do a redelivery. And anyway, they had a clickable tracking number. Well, because, you know, on watching this show, and hearing John Hogoboom, who talks about spam quite often and talks about all those, like UPS and DHL, carrier email fraud, I was hesitant. So I wrote down the number on a piece of paper, and I went to the FedEx site, and I put it in manually, and it turns out it was, in fact, legitimate. But I thought it was very odd that they sent an email like that. But again, because of all of this sort of thing happening, I think, you know, you're never going to feel good about clicking on anything in an email. So
right.
it's you're going to feel like you've got to check it out, then write it down and check it out, through a regular browser.
Right, and don't click on the link, but as you said, write down the tracking number and then go and enter that once you've gone to the page that you've navigated to yourself for checking the delivery.
Right, and because I saw this on my cell phone, I didn't have the ability to do the right click and see, where the link really was going. But even then, I'm somewhat suspicious. So I'll just say one more thing about this whole Gameover Zeus. In August, it was the feeling was, and I say the feeling was because, again, it's been hard to pinpoint this botnet because of the way it operates. But there were approximately 680,000 infected machines. And then the chief scientist at Looking Glass, a security firm, he was quoted on saying 3 days ago on December the 3rd, and just on that day, that they saw over 43,000 unique hosts infected with this using Cutwail, that other botnet that's sending out the spam on behalf of Zeus. So anyway, it seems to be growing again, and I think it's something that's just going to keep resurfacing and resurfacing. Now, we don't have an internet weather report today, but we do have something equally as exciting, and that's John Markley, who's going to tell us a little bit about some new updates on mobile security.
Yeah, and really it's just some threats and some concerns that I think will interest, the audience as well as, as ourselves, and professionals. So the kind of the same light, one of the kind of the fun ones that I saw recently was an attack where you would receive a phishing email, and if you clicked on the links in the phishing email, again, just like you were talking about, Nancy, with with Zeus and everything I saw, and David, you don't click on links in emails. I don't do that anymore. It kills me that people do that. I always retype it. But if you click on that link, it would go into the router and the local network and actually access your local admin router, which can cause it to change the DNS settings, can cause it to point to a false DNS. We've all heard about those types of issues in the past, right? Those are fairly common attacks. We've always told people, change your passwords, change your settings. The new mechanism that kind of made this a little bit more interesting, the venue here, is that they did it through mobile email. So they actually emailed your phone, and so if your phone is on your local Wi-Fi network, it would then, if you were selecting those links, would then allow it to access those admin accounts on the local router. And so, we always say change those default passwords. I mean, the same thing, if they let you. I know the Samsung printers didn't let you do it. But they always say change those default passwords, and that's what people don't think to do. And even professionals, even in major corporations, I still see, it's the old Cisco, enable, user account enable and password enable, type thing, or Cisco and enable, or admin and admin. We see those things all the time. And it's the same thing with the network routers. And doing so could mean the difference between going to the real, I'll give you an example, a real Microsoft, and somebody's faked, a DNS entry that takes you to a malicious site that turns around and gives you malware, steals your credit cards. Again, the phone, just saw a study on this, the browsers on the phone do not adhere to the W3C standards. They don't tell you all the time that there's an SSL session. It doesn't tell you all the time, like I said, you can't right-click on the link to see what's really behind the link. And so it's something that you have to take every precaution that you can, whether it's on your computer, whether it's on your phone, wherever, do good security practices, but also do it on your other equipment, because you just don't know, that you've opened yourself up. So that's kind of the first one. It does take a little bit of a perfect storm. Like I said, you have to be on the local network. You have to have left your admin accounts as a default, but it's still, it's still kind of a new attack mechanism is through the mobile.
One comment about those default passwords is people should be aware of this, especially in the security community, but I don't think they always recognize that those default passwords are very easily found online. People compile lists of these things, and they're out there. So, you've got to change them first thing.
Yep, exactly. But it kind of goes back to the new standard is that even the mobile devices that you have are now mechanisms to attack your home network. So we have to think about that as well. Kind of the other thing I was going to mention, really the bigger one probably, is that there is some new malware that's out there for Android devices, and it's kind of an old story. There's a way that you wrap up an application, an app, and you kind of package it within an installer that turns around and does something else. And it's a known problem. We've talked about it probably many times on this program, and you've seen it in the press and everything like that. But it's still prevalent. The latest attack vector that's being used is people are saying, they'll advertise a new product like Angry Birds Star Wars, which recently came out, or Need for Speed, Grand Theft Auto. And what they'll say is, hey, you know what? If you go to this alternative application store, not the regular Google Play Store, but an alternative one, we can get it for you for free. And so they'll go to that. A lot of people do that. They'll go to those alternate stores. They'll grab it. They'll install it, and it takes a little bit of time. In this particular attack vector, it takes a little bit of a time to install it. While it's installing, what it's doing is it's part of a botnet, and it's getting 100 phone numbers. And it's sending SMS messages, I shouldn't say that, it's sending emails or SMS texts to those numbers saying, click this link to win a Target $100 gift card, as an example. And they'll click that, people who click that link actually gets charged a premium because it's an SMS, number that actually, charges a pretty excessive amount of money. And they're gathering a lot of money off of this. The programs themselves, the apps like Angry Birds Star Wars, for example, that are being packaged in this way don't really run. So after they've installed, after it's sent out 100 of these, it'll turn around and it'll kind of refresh itself, go back to the command and control server, get a new list of 100, maybe even a new text message in a new type of format, new links, whatever, and resend to another 100. So it's always churning even there. Even though you think that it didn't install cleanly, it's not working right, it's actually that install program put some malware on the phone that's allowing these premium SMS messages, these text messages to go out.
Something that they, you talking about this and also about the Gameover botnet is that stalling tactic that they seem to be using lately. That it appears that something is happening, but it's taking a while, and while it's doing that, it is doing something in the background, and you're diverted by waiting for something for it to install or whatever it's supposed to be doing.
And I always say on these things is there's nothing in life that's free, right? So if you see a new product like Angry Birds and Star Wars is the newest version, and it says it's free if you go to this other store, don't do it, right? It's not a good idea. From a father of 3 boys who all have Android phones, I tell them repeatedly, do not get any software that's not off of the approved stores. I mean, just don't do it. I don't care how much pressure you get, how much you feel like, don't get it off the unapproved stores. And secondly, Android is actually pretty good, is that it'll actually pop it up and say, what permissions do you want to give this app? And it does that in such a fashion that if you are reading those prompts, you have to think to yourself, well, why does this app need to send text messages? Why does it need access to my contacts list? And so I always tell my boys, I said, and it's good practices, is that if an application asks for excessive amount of permissions in the Android environment, say no. I mean, again, nothing's free, and if it's not legitimate, or if it is legitimate, it's going to actually tell you why it needs it. I don't know. It just floors me how much. But this particular issue with this Need for Speed and Grand Theft Auto and Angry Birds Star Wars has gotten some pretty big widespread access just because people want things for free and they don't think about what could be happening.
Now, I just read that there are more malicious Android apps or things running around out there more than there are malicious PC viruses, worms, etc.
There's opinions on that. It depends on who you talk to. Some of the experts who collect the data disagree because there's a question on families versus variants. Mm-hmm. The key element there to remember is that some of these apps, especially in the Android market, what they'll do is they'll change themselves just slightly. So you may have the same malicious access, and it may have thousands. It may even be tailored one-to-one. So this malicious app is only applicable to John Markley's phone. And so that's easy to do in the Android world. And so from a signature-based effort, it's tough to catch those. And so if you can generate those and spawn those types of variations very rapidly, like they can, it does create an overabundance of counts if you count it. That's one viewpoint. The other viewpoint of it is that the Android market, of course, is pretty. It's almost the wild west, really, in regards to what you can install, where you can install it, and what you can get. It's also, there are some concerns over the terms of use that Google and others apply to their apps and their products, and that these things do ask you right before you're allowed to do it. So they'll say, is it okay if we use the contact list? And you'll say yes. In that case, if it's asked you, is it truly malicious? Because it told you it was going to do it. And so, again, that from a counting perspective, there's some disagreement in the field. Do we count those things that are actually legitimate versions? If it tells you it's going to send out 100 texts or it's going to send out emails to your contact list, and you say okay, then is it really malware? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the discussion. But I do know that most of the studies are saying that because, and this is my personal opinion, because there's going to be most of the studies do say that there's going to be a large amount of malware on the Android market. My personal opinion is that's due to the ability to load anything you want, the inexperience of the typical user, and the impression that your phone is not a computer. If you were to do that on your PC, you would never do it. But
10 years ago, people did it. They learned.
Yeah, they learned. 10 years ago, people didn't do that on your PC. If your PC said, hey, click here, we're still seeing a lot of that, but, don't install this program. Well, people don't. They're getting good at the PC. So I do think that you're going to see, the next few years, probably, an increasing market for, user aids, such as antivirus and anti-spam, whatever, on the mobile devices. But again, if the user clicks OK, there's nothing you can do. And all right, so now I'm not depressed. I just bummed it out. So I got two more things I was going to mention. One is that there's been a recent update and a lot of discussion on Facebook and Twitter that there's the ability to do man-in-the-middle attacks. A lot of that's due to the fact that most of their communication's not encrypted. And Facebook's fixed that. There's another product, the name escapes me, fixed it as well. Twitter's the newest one that says that they've corrected it. Basically, and I am not a Twitter fanatic. I do not even have Twitter installed on anything, so I'm going to tell you that right off. This is all research and watching other people do it. So Twitter in the United States, you typically use, for carriers like AT&T, you use a short code, which is like, I think it's a 404, something like that. You text to that to send Twitter. So if you're not using the app, you can also use Twitter via text. In your Twitter account, you can enable receive SMS or texting to update my account. What they found is that it's possible to pretend to be somebody else and send it to what they call long codes. Long codes are found in companies like Germany or whatever that may not have a carrier to provide texting updates to Twitter. And what they're finding is that short code, people who normally use short codes like the United States, people could spoof you by using these long codes and sending texts. Twitter's fixed this, and they didn't fix it with an app update or anything like that. Basically, they said if you are in a short code area or carrier, then we do not allow long code posts from you. They've also recommended that for places that do allow long codes, that they enable the pin feature. So they actually have to, every time you post something to Twitter through a text message, you have to do it by entering a pin. Unfortunately, even in the countries outside the United States that allow those pin codes, it's people just don't do it. You have to turn it on. It's a recommendation. So it's technically resolved. I think that from a Twitter perspective, it's resolved because they've protected the short code users, which I would guess are pretty much most of their communities. Most users don't probably use SMS texting to update their Twitter accounts. The challenge is AT&T is a short code carrier. Some of the carriers in the United States do not have short code for Twitter. Verizon does. U.S. Cellular does. I think there's one other carrier, but some of the other companies do not. And so it is a concern that if you are in one of those other carriers, to be really careful about what gets posted. Now, as a non-Twitter user and somebody who doesn't have, is fairly newbie on even Facebook, I guess the question is if I'm posting something to Twitter, I think that typically I would not expect it to ever be, God's honest truth, right? It's information that you're posting. Did it really come from me? And I think proving that would be very difficult. And Twitter says that they can secure that. But again, I don't think I would ever read anything like that and attest to a jury that is legitimately from the person who says it is. So I don't want to diminish the risk here with this particular man-in-the-middle attack, but it is something to consider that spoofing a Twitter post is probably not very high on the list of all-time security risks, right?
Right. Although I had also read that part of this risk was that you can update some of your settings on Twitter as well, so you can configure the account.
You probably could as well. You probably could change it, but I don't think many people put on Twitter like their credit cards or anything else, Dave. So I don't know. I mean, from a risk perspective, again, it's something to be considered of.
Some pretty personal stuff out there.
Yeah, maybe that's the lesson here. And then really, in kind of the same thing, in the same light, is the last thing I probably leave you with for this segment, is that there have been a number of products out in the market that have been getting updates, and Facebook's an example. Some of the other ones are coming out as well due to security risks. They're finding them all the time, and we attest to this all the time that that keep your products current, keep doing the updates. And mobile applications are the same. I just saw one for a little bit ago for Instagram. That update that app. I'm probably the poster child for a bleeding edge update. Currency. Update comes out, boom, I loaded it. Heck, I'm running Windows 8 on my home PC, for crying out loud, which is kind of scary. But you update things. I update things pretty regularly, and I would say that in the mobile world, it's almost more important, just because there's so much going on, and we're shifting so much of our efforts to the mobile environment that keeping those products current is probably as important, if not more important, than keeping your desktop current nowadays. So.
No, my bank even sent me, or didn't send me. I was logging into it through my phone and said I could not use their service unless I updated the app. And then they sent me an email too, telling me the same thing. So I thought that was pretty good of them to do. Maybe more should do that.
I hope that really came from your bank.
I should worry it was on an Android phone. Yeah, I went to their site, and it said it right smack on their homepage.
Okay, that's good confirmation.
All right, well, I think that's our show for today. If you'd like to keep in touch with us, you can email us at threattrack@list.att.com. This video program is also available at att.com/threattrack and also on YouTube. And an audio version is also available from iTunes, and you can just search for ThreatTraq there. Thanks again to Dave and to John for joining us today, and thank you, all of you who are watching. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, keep your network safe. Thanks.